Good evening. Welcome to the next panel of the second day of the Freedom Games. Today we are going to talk about disinformation, propaganda, freedom of speech. I can hear the speaker. It works. So to begin with, we had some adventures. It's okay. I hope you can hear me now. So we are going to talk in the evening about disinformation, propaganda, freedom of speech on the internet in the face of war. We are going to look at disinformation as one of the leading problems. The theme of the Freedom Games is the green independence. But I always say that disinformation is one of the biggest problems of future and present, because disinformation influences election, choices, attitudes, influences our society, changes attitudes, polarizes, and very often, unfortunately, it builds nationalism. We are going to talk about disinformation, mainly during the war. We'll be talking how Russia is using disinformation as a weapon. It uses disinformation not only from the 24th of February, it's been doing it for many years. Disinformation is an old tactic, but now we have new technologies, social media, and information that reaches us much faster. I would like to present our guests. Michał, Gramatyka, a member to the Polish Parliament. Małgorzata Kilian, Grzegorczyk, the founder and president of the Demagog Association, which is an organization which deals with fact-checking. Korewa, the director of the Warsaw office of the Atlantic Council. Good evening. Marcin, Olender, manager for government relations and public policies for the Central and Eastern Europe at Google. Good evening. My name is Maia Mazurkiewicz. I'm a co-founder of the Alliance for Europe, where we counteract disinformation and support strategic communication. Okay then. Tonight we are going to talk about disinformation, how it has changed our world. For over 2 years, we live with fear. Initially, we had pandemic. Disinformation was before discussed only by experts, and when the pandemic started and pandemic-related topics emphasized the disinformation, it shows how it changes attitudes and polarizes people. And the war and Russian invasion in Ukraine has strengthened and reinforced this topic. Kamila, I wanted to ask you, Małgorzata, I'm sorry. You are dealing with fact-checking, you are checking what is going on the internet. And what have you noticed at the very beginning? It was the 24th of February. Everyone woke up and was very frightened, and you had to verify internet, and you had to see how it influences our environment. So let's start with Poland. Thank you very much for the invite. As you have mentioned, the Demagog Association verifies information which reaches us also from Ukraine, Russia, information that is manipulated, and the scale was very surprising, because never before in the modern history we have not experienced such a huge inflow of fake news. Our work is consistent daily monitoring of internet. We verify the information to detect fake news. When we are looking at the Russian disinformation, it's the unending work, because disinformation from Russia works at different levels. It's a system of babushkas, and the more we aspire to reach the truth, we discover there are more and more layers, and many centers. There are many centers which disseminate disinformation. We are looking at the international governmental levels. We are talking about the actors who spread disinformation and try to make this information credible. So this fight is very hard. We also witness, we listen to the opinions and needs of our readers. It's not about what we had to face, it was rather about the society, what they had to face. And people were completely lost in this information chaos, in this continuous receipt of information via social media or any other media. And it showed us that people do not need just verification of information. Our aim was to make the society more resilient to disinformation, to show them the structures of disinformation, which topics people have to be sensitive about. For example, the topic of Ukrainian nationalists, or some information on Ukrainians in Poland threaten Poles. So we have focused on sensitive areas, how Russia can operate and manipulate information, and we were to demonstrate simple tools people can use in their daily lives. So we had to concentrate how to verify info, but also how to make the society more educated and resilient. So disinformation polarizes and destabilizes. Russia doesn't need the consolidated strategy, communication strategy. They want to raise fear, uncertainty, and they were doing in Poland during the war. Aaron, we were talking how Russia acts in other countries. You are a Pole, American, Swede, so you've got the global perspective. You are also the head of Atlantic Council, where you work in different countries. So I'm sure that you have different perspective on Russian disinformation. What is your opinion? Thank you very much for the invitation. I am sorry. Sometimes maybe I will include some English words. If yes, please translate them, because I have lived in America. I was born in Sweden. My mom is from Poland. And our Atlantic Council organization was opened last month, so we are stronger together. So we want to build a transatlantic community. When it comes to the Russian propaganda, we can accuse Russians of many things, but they are not completely stupid in a way. They are stupid when we look at what they did since February. They made so many mistakes, so many crazy things that you can think they are totally stupid, but they know very well that Russia is weaker than the United States and the transatlantic community, that they have no chance to win with this community. So the only chance is when we start arguing, when we are not interested in Ukraine and the rest of the world, when we are only involved in our own problems and arguments and divisions. The Russian propaganda do not aim to convince them about their truths. It's rather more about convincing people that there are no truth and that people remain passive. Very often, Russian propaganda expresses some contradictions. For example, this issue of M18 airplane that was attacked by a missile. So they were saying that Ukrainians shot the plane, then they were saying that they used the rocket. So it's like a spaghetti tactic. You throw spaghetti on the wall to see which pattern will be seen. So Russian propaganda is interested in the weaknesses of societies, and Russians are often lost. They don't know about our strengths, and there are many such cases. For example, in Sweden recently, they were discussing their accession to NATO. So Russians were threatening us, threatening Sweden that nuclear weapons will be used. So Russians were trying to steer wrong attitude to NATO. So Russia was pushing, and of course Swedes went the other way. Good example from Poland, which shows that Russians failed. Russians didn't know that there would be friendship between Poland and Ukraine. Russians thought that when they talk about Bandera men, it will be enough to stir hatred. So everybody admires Ukrainian and this friendship between the two nations. So propaganda was efficient when they were using polarization. It's huge polarization. In Poland we are witnessing similar experience. When Russia attacked Ukraine, they forgot that in America there is this ruling for the little guy. So this is how Russia behaves towards the neighbors. So Americans remember the Cold War, and they remember these are the Russians who are so bossy. So we have to show them their place. It's not them, it's us. In April I went to Hawaii, and we can say, we can think Hawaiians know nothing about Ukraine, but if you go to Honolulu, there are Ukrainian flags everywhere. Of course, there is a risk, a danger, but there is weakness of Russian propaganda. But we can counteract it. I'm sure we will be talking about it. Stronger together, it's an answer to disinformation.
Marcin, over to you, because I'm making a round showing what has happened, and then we'll try to find a remedy to what is happening. So, from Google's point of view, have you seen any intensified activity? YouTube is still present in Russia. So, what have you observed? What did you have to implement? Right, thank you. On the 24th of February, it came as a shock. We are still in the extraordinary war mode, but the phenomena were rooted in the game that Russia has been running for a dozen or so years. But the attack on Ukraine cast a different light, and extraordinary measures were taken. The truth is that YouTube is open. As a principle, anybody can publish anything. But principally, when we talk about disinformation, speaking nonsense and lying is not illegal in the free world, and essentially it is not against our rules. But in the case of COVID, we moved the limits because we thought about that disinformation about vaccination or the existence of some magical potions to cure COVID is dangerous, and such things have to be fought. Well, if there is a direct link between disinformation and the actual harm for the society, then we say stop. Flat Earth, okay. COVID doesn't exist, is not okay. But when the war started, we took unprecedented steps. Within a few days, which is very short in Google, First, we removed Russia Today, Sputnik, and other governmental and government-related channels. It was like a wave. Finally, in relation to the war, we removed thousands of channels and thousands of videos from different sites. Russia has been isolated. There are no Russian commercials, and Russian entities cannot advertise. And this is also cutting them from the sources of financing. That was a challenging decision because it deprives independent YouTubers from financing, but we considered it indispensable. The limits have been shifted or moved. There were some changes as for the policies. We negated violent events in such a sense that the war should not be described as special military operation. All these things are considered as negations of a violent event. And there were problems even with Russian authorities. Ms. Zakharova threatened us many times. We are in a state of alarm when we will be switched off once we remove another governmental video from Russia. We always expect that would be the moment. YouTube is the last portal, a web platform available for Russians. And if somebody wants, although many don't, wants to learn the truth, they can do it owing to YouTube. Hence, we think it's worth staying there as long as possible. For us, this is also the window inside Russia, and we can see some things that we wouldn't see otherwise. What about algorithms? Because very often YouTube makes suggestions after watching a video. Have you considered it in the context of disinformation? Because those which contain fake news and disinformation can be suggested. Principally, such content should not be recommended, not in relation to Russia, but generally. Since 2019, we've been implementing actions and measures to increase the number of sources of reliable information and reduce the number of those which are not reliable, because disinformation is a broad term. The point is that quality should be a very important criterion for algorithm, namely who it comes from, whether it's a trusted, reliable source. We've got some extra subsets where there is top news. It is only associated with videos from renowned sources such as BBC or CNN. It's not only in reference to Russia, but it works, and it's very useful when we want to limit Russian propaganda. Right, there is also Digital Services Act from the European Commission. It was signed by a number of websites, which obliges them to make thorough checks. But before we move on to all these measures, I've got the question to you, Michał. How has the Russian actions and invasion affected politics in the context of foreign policy and what Małgorzata said, Russian disinformation often denied, claiming that it's a nationalist state. So, from the politician's point of view, how do you approach it? Also, in the context of the election, as far as Russian aggression on Ukraine is concerned, there's no problem in Poland because we're all Ukrainians today. And we know that Ukraine fights to our benefits. It's at the forefront, and we are also there, but we are not fully aware that it is the fight for the free world and free Europe. Before the aggression, there had been the pandemic. The major problem related to disinformation on the internet is that people who believe it voice their opinions. They are resistant to reasonable arguments and they cannot be convinced to anything else. I've got a sheet of paper written with from top to bottom because one of the mayors of cities next to mine negated COVID. He claimed that an excellent way to handle what everybody calls COVID is to pray. This is one of the methods that help us spiritually get over this challenge, but he also said that vaccinations didn't work, that these were paramedic preparations. And he didn't voice this opinion as the inhabitant of Siemianowice Śląskie, but as the mayor of Siemianowice Śląskie. Such statements made in public promoted him onto the position of a leader of such groups. He was invited to many meetings, to groups, and YouTube did not remove his videos, but we'll talk about it later because now I know who I should talk to about it. The obligation of each of us is to inform everybody and inform the court about it. So everybody said that from the legal point of view, there is no way to respond, that there is no way to respond to such behavior. In Poland, if you are an officer, you can say nonsense. And this is something that is hazardous. It's detrimental. A group of people will believe him because he is the mayor of the cities, and if the mayor says so, there must be some truth in it. And this entails major health issues. Fortunately, I'm saying in inverted commas, when Russia invaded Ukraine, on accounts in the social media were against vaccinations disappeared, and they started showing that this is a justified aggression. And anti-vaccination topics have disappeared. Therefore, the people, the anti-vaccination groups in Silesia were quite content, I suppose. This is a huge challenge because whenever disinformation works, when it reaches our minds and it shifts the vector of our understanding of the phenomena that drive us, it can trigger particular political effects, such as the successes of Donald Trump or Cambridge Analytica. It was proven what percentage of the UK citizens was affected by the algorithms suggesting targeted content. It was very good that Digital Services Act and similar measures have been implemented. Digital Market Act also referred to it in a smaller, in a more limited sense. Our digital habitat has become safer as a result. It is not possible for anybody to buy political advertisement. It's not possible to place anything there. Even in TikTok, you have to think what content you publish, because the social media filter the content and they do not want to be misleading. Right. Not all digital services provisions have been implemented yet. You tackled upon a very important issue, which is the freedom of speech. Very often, when we talk about disinformation, we talk about freedom of speech and to what extent we can remove something or say something. From this perspective, I want to refer to the Russian accounts that has been changing. We monitor a number of accounts which send different disinformation narratives. When we when you take a look at Russia and other disinforming entities, we have to admit that their strategy is really good. This is quite a simple strategy, in fact. It destabilizes, polarizes the society, and you don't have to do much to succeed. I'm just smiling when you talk about the freedom of speech. I don't want to talk about politics, but I'm a member of the Commission of Innovation and Digitalization and New Technologies in the Polish Parliament. We have been discussing the Digital Services Act, and there is a requirement which states that digital platforms will be allowed to cancel an account and there would be a body to refer to. During this during the meeting of the commission, typically not everybody comes. Nobody in the Polish parliament knows anything about the digitalization. But once there was a discussion about the freedom of speech, the elite of the ruling party arrived, and it was right after the account of the Polish political organization was cancelled, and they decided the Polish government will settle all the disputes. It was really funny because we all know what the attitude of the Polish government is to the freedom of speech and to interfering into our rights the right to check what collects them. They've got the appetite for it as I do for steaks. So it was really real fun. Right, there was even the idea behind derived from the protection of the freedom of speech. I'm not going to talk about Polish politics because soon we'll learn that there are American agents here that will be produced by Russian disinformation. But you refer to very important aspects. Leaders. It matters when you are in the position of responsibility and you know that words matter, that what you say is not fun, is not game, that it is meaningful. The second thing, when it comes to people who believe this information, the phenomenon can be described by the fact that these are the people who feel they don't hold their lot in their hands, that something that's happening around them cannot be changed or affected. They invent a vision of the world where there are huge powers, elites, authorities, and I am the only one who knows the truth. I'm not going to be lured by vaccination. I'm not going to listen to the elites talking about Russia because I know the truth, which is nothing but the truth. I'm the superhero. I'm the Batman who can see everything. And typically, it's a man with internet connection, and that's it. So that's a challenge. That's tough because, as we heard, some reasonable arguments do not work because it's difficult to change the mindset. Right, once in fear and we change our thinking, we can be easily reached by disinformation. Marcin? I would like to elaborate on what Michał said. It's very interesting. This is a general act. For example, it includes regulations which reflect concern that websites should not arbitrarily remove such accounts. We talk about that now, and we know that it will be more difficult to cancel, to remove disinforming accounts. I don't know how we are going to implement the regulation provision that states that your account contributes to lower ranking of the website. We keep some content away from algorithms, and then once the act is implemented, we'll have to inform the people so that they can take any preventive measures to enter the algorithm. You have to be really cautious when it comes to such regulations because even though you will to do something good, you can do the opposite. And as for the mayor of Siemianowice Śląskie, if you see something bad which should be removed, please report it because it works. Perhaps not always so fast, but it's worth reporting it, as otherwise we won't be able to remove any longer speeches. Now I know, but if it's a longer, complex presentation, the algorithm may not be able to capture it. Reporting matters in this respect. What should we do to take advantage of these algorithms? We have a diversified and interesting group of panelists. We complain a lot. We say what has been happening and we analyze a situation which is dangerous. Disinformation is dangerous. If we don't talk about it, if we don't educate people, we'll have a much serious problem. We also said that Russia has clear strategies, and the same applies to other actors who use disinformation. What can we do to create such a strategy? If we look back at 2008, 2009, if we had been listening to other stakeholders in the European Union, we would have learned that southern member states talked about the refugee crisis. In 2014, there was the first Russian invasion on Ukraine. Poland and Central Eastern European countries said we had to be careful because Russia would strike again. And nothing has been done. Now we sit here and say we have to be careful because disinformation changes our stance, changes our approach. We're in a situation in which we have lots of Ukrainian refugees, which is great, but it is also dangerous and it might lead to polarization. So perhaps we could dream on and use the things that we do together to create a strategy for the future. What to do to stop disinformation, to be stronger together.
I would like to start. I represent an NGO, but we operate at different levels. And I think that if we do not act together, this fight will be always lost. So we should start with the actions addressed to the citizens. Campaign, information campaign on disinformation should be implemented. We should try to educate citizens. This is the level which can be done by each one of us. We can use technological platforms, politicians can be used, or any other organizations can be used. We can also look at the international level. The European Commission recently has done a lot in this context and imposes some obligations for the platforms. As the Demagog Association, we cooperate with these platforms and we are very happy with these initiatives. We started cooperation with Facebook, hence we can show citizens some facts. You have asked what freedom of speech means. It's not about presenting one single perspective. It's rather about giving choices to the society and to show them the real facts and which alternatives are available. So by our cooperation with Facebook, we can show this perspective. We can identify, label disinformation contents. We can also observe the actors who disseminate disinformation. They are very often the profiles which base on emotions. They know exactly how to create messages to make them popular and go viral. So this is very important. And internally, we've had long discussions what to do. I think we're still not doing enough, and if we do not have educated and resilient society, all these actions will fail. So we need a coalition focused on education and strengthening the social tissue. I think it's really important. Great, so we have regulations, we are identifying content, so we mean the education. It's not only education for school, but it's the education we can deliver via internet. We cooperate with University of Berkeley. We have some tools available and we can work using these tools together to do more. What's next? Well, I have some problems with Demagog. I have seen in 5 cases they have actually decided that the contents I have shared is fake, but great that there are initiatives that check facts and they check what politicians say. This association shows when the politicians simply lie. So apart from the individual case of mine, I'm really all for such initiatives. Of course, we will implement the digital package into the Polish law systems. It will take place in the next consecutive years. Artificial Intelligence Act is also a part of this legislation, so it will be addressed in the Polish legislation. When it comes to politicians, there is a problem with politicians. Politicians themselves very often use disinformation. When you watch TVN station, you see a completely different word than the word you are watching in the public TV station, and it's not incidental. In the ideal ecosystem, all the TV stations would be showing the same contents, events, the same main characters, but by selecting the topics, selecting the videos and commentaries, we can see 2 completely different words which do not have much in common. When it comes to politicians, very often they publish fake news of things they have not been changed to raise some emotions in the citizens, to convince more people to vote for them. The refugee crisis in Poland allowed the Law and Justice Party win the latest election. They used this crisis cynically. The fears have been used. Also, the low level of our education has been used. So, if we are to be responsible, we need to provide you with the know-how. We have to make sure that only the truth is disseminated, and hopefully it will be easy to check whether it's true or not. The problem, however, is that in our world everything happens very fast. So an article is published and we only read the headline, and then we develop the image of the world based on this headline. So we have to take care of the education. In our group we have the following rule: we do not reach for some cynical manipulations. We are trying to check the contents. I'm sure that there is a big group of people who are not convinced about it. They follow some stereotypes which are reinforced by our peers on the other side of the barricade. I do not want to get into the politics. I just want to show some mechanisms that govern this process. I'm always asking questions when I am in the parliament or when I'm on the TV, when I confront my colleagues from other political parties. I am just asking questions, and I ask them, what does it really look like? Or I ask if I'm sure that somebody is lying to achieve some effect. I just love discussions with Janusz Kowalski, who talks a lot about the energy sector, and he is always telling lies. My questions are very precise, and it's helpful to show that he's lying. Short time. What to do that the communication is more strategic. Even when we look at Poland, there is disinformation and there is also miscommunication. Both these phenomena coexist. I think that politicians, and not only politicians, use new technologies and means of communication. So we need to use a better strategic communication, so not just to answer the contents. It's not, we shouldn't only just use the fact checking. There are different theories that work. The Atlantic Council has the same approach, so the free banking is an example. If we see some context, we shouldn't write more about them because it's like we're supplying them with extra oxygen. So we have to disseminate contents based on values, unification. Is it possible in politics? I don't agree with you that politicians don't use modern technologies. TikTok has recently limited the reach of the context to politicians because in TikTok they decided that more and more politicians share contents. Before, a fragment of the TV show could be disseminated and you could reach millions of people, and now it's not possible. Only some credible videos are shared via TikTok. Recently, I took part in a discussion with the heads of TikTok in Poland, and they said they do not want to have politics in the social medium. I wonder how they will achieve this. We will see. Very often, new technologies are used by politicians. Sometimes they often pretend they do not use modern technologies, but believe me, they are using them. So it's another information. Politicians use media and technologies. We will see how it will evolve. There are many interesting ideas in Brussels, for example, limiting the use of political advertisements on internet. This is another many ideas by the European Commission. It's a good idea, in my opinion. It's quite controversial, and this code is another good idea. The code of good practice in terms of preventing disinformation. So the Commission has negotiated with some companies, and some obligations, some undertakings have been expressed. So I think it will work well. Aaron, I love this catchphrase catchphrase of yours, stronger together. Małgosia has also said it. It has to be a package of joint actions. We have to reinforce each other. Legislation, code, the so-called soft law is also important. Education is hyper important. So, educated and critical society which is competent in media, is a society that is difficult to manipulate. I don't know whether you sometimes watch YouTube. Have you seen an ad? I'm joking. It's a niche video platform. Have you seen these ads or videos? Social campaign. Actually, we have cooperated with Demagog on this campaign. So they are using the technique of the so-called pre-banking. So they are showing how such banks can manipulate us, so they make the society resilient to such actions. So it's one of the results of a broad programs after the invasion of Russia against Ukraine, and we started to deliver it. We will also deliver next educational projects, and we will have a broader cooperation with such organizations as Demagog, not only in Poland but in the region, to create a network of sharing good practices to strengthen each other, and we will support such organizations in their work. And on the other hand, we will want to get knowledge from them how to strengthen our actions. So definitely education is required, and good cooperation, and maybe a little bit of regulations which will be used as a spice. I'm very happy about this cooperation. I think it's worth discussing. We have to work together. Lots of smart things have been expressed on strategic communication. I must say that leaders should treat their audiences as adults and mature people who understand the truth, understand the reality, and they shouldn't be lied to make sure that politicians communicate their messages. It's not so difficult to tell the truth. Education. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that it's a bigger problem in the West that we do not teach critical thinking. It starts at schools. Actually, in America, in Sweden, probably also in Poland. I didn't live in Poland for a long time, but people say, I can think critically, but what does it mean? Can you see that the US government is saying something, you don't like the US government, so you say it's the other way around, so it's not critical, it's just like pointing at someone with your finger. You can train chimpanzee to show different direction than the direction proposed by the US government. I like the things performed by the technological companies. I don't know all initiatives in detail. I know that there is a function available so that you can pass the information on via Twitter. So you can and there is a kind of a signal. You have only read the headline, but maybe you would like to read the whole article. Russian state in media. This is another article. It really reveals Russian methods. So you have to warn people. You are a megaphone, a loudspeaker for Putin. It blocks emotions nicely. So this is how disinformation works. Sometimes the rules on what can be published, what cannot be. I don't know the situation in Poland, but I know that in many Western states there is a problem that people don't understand how these regulations, how these rules work. My colleague sent me a photo with Vladimir Putin naked, but he had women's breast, and there was a caption, Russian vaccine has no side effects. I thought it was funny, so I shared it via Facebook. So I was blocked because you can not show naked bodies on Facebook. So I understand this rule. My mom said that now during the election in Sweden, she wrote something on Facebook. She wrote that crime rate is increasing, people don't feel safe, and it was blocked. Why? Because it's similar to the narrative of the radical right wing. Is it radical wing that people are afraid of crime? This is not quite clear to people. Unfortunately, many people will not believe in fact-checking. I don't know if it happens in Poland, but it's a major problem in the West, in the United States. People say they do not believe in fact-checking. They say it's done by liberals. They want to cut off the voice of conservatives. So a short commentary, because I would like to ask the audience to intervene. So I think I have thought of a nice solutions. I think that in the social media, the posts that are affiliated by politicians but not written by politicians should be labeled. So social media users should know when Michał Gramatyka writes to him or when it's done by his social assistants using the same account. Now it's not really clear. When you go onto Twitter, you don't know whether it's Prime Minister Morawiecki who writes posts to you, or maybe it's done by the agency hired by the Prime Minister. So disinformation should be introduced, because then we would know who is writing to us. Once when there was a technical problem with Facebook, actually we discovered who were the authors of some accounts, and then it was discovered that the same agency is managing profiles of different political parties, and the users were unaware of this. They don't know that these agencies also run accounts of Coca-Cola or Nike, but you don't vote for Coca-Cola. But if it's for different MPs, it's important. I have seen politicians who also write their own contents. I would just like to emphasize one thing. Michał said that everything is going on very quickly. Aaron said that in TikTok there is this mechanism which says, hang on a second. So our next campaign, which has been already launched in the States, is the campaign called Start the Pause, slow down, push the pause button, think for a second. I am an old man, I don't use TikTok, only Twitter is my medium. It's a very important aspect added to our list. We have to be more aware of ourselves, how we consume media, and aware of our emotions. I will read out the list. It's quite broad, what we can do. So education for critical thinking, regulations, labeling, context, fact-checking, code of good practices, strategic communication, and cooperation. I think cooperation is most important, because all of us, I think, can see that there is no one golden method to fix this information. So we have to work together to generate the change. I can see some hands raised. So please pass the mic. Good evening. I was listening to this debate and it sounded very optimistic. I am under the impression that it's about political interest. Everybody fosters and promotes their interest, and the reality is quite dark. How the freedom of speech is connected with responsibility. There is the Council of Ethics. We know how internet operates, how the algorithm works. So I can see very dark reality. And I have heard completely different things from you. You are talking about disinformation. You are saying that Russians do not manage very well in Sweden, in Poland. They were doing very well in the States until certain time. Actually, in the United States, there is this threat of authoritarianism. You have covered two key things: critical thinking and the lack of truth. It's not about the truth. So the question is, how should we cope with this? Because wonderful slogans, but I think that it's not integrated. Russians were doing very well in the United States. They still manage very well in the United States. But I heard something different. Maybe Aaron could comment. I received reality check. It's very important. Thank you. Well, it's not all so optimistic. A lot of work has to be done. I do not have any good answers. I am bullish when it comes to America and the West. We can see the alternatives. I don't think that it is possible to do something with an algorithm. It's not about technical solutions. Actually, they can be helpful. Okay, they can be helpful. I am not an expert in technology, so I cannot address this. That's why I'm talking about education and critical thinking. In the United States, the situation is not so good. It's a fact. The committee of the 6th of January has not convinced all, but the surveys show that there are more Republican Party supporters who say, I like the party, but I don't like Donald Trump. Not all of them say this, but there are more of such people. So something has worked. So you have to tell the truth. You have to talk about the actual situation. It will not resolve all the issues, but it will be helpful. I would like to comment. Our role is very difficult because association has operated for 8 years. And we were acting single-handed. Everybody was asking, what do we need fact-checking for? Why to check disinformation? But now we know it's a threat. So, from my perspective, I think it's great that now we are talking about it, that we are fighting disinformation, and this fight is of strategic importance at the level of platforms that can also become accountable for the contents they disseminate. It's the accountability, responsibility of ourselves. It relates to the future. That's why I emphasize education and critical thinking. I do not want to make other entities responsible, but if we do not have this bottom-up pressure, nothing will change, and we will pretend that everybody knows the reality. Russians, we have not talked about trolls and bots, which do a lot of damage in the internet. People are deceived. It's incredible that people discuss with bots, and it really happens. So without the elementary education, we are not talking about the rocket science, manipulation techniques, models of working. We have to make sure that people reach for credible information sources. So maybe the enthusiasm is due to the fact that we are talking about it and we are raising the awareness.
Well, I disagree with you that this is a dull image. When you watch Hacking the World video, where the mechanism of Cambridge Analytica is described, it's no longer feasible due to some regulations implemented in the legal system, and that websites undertook to follow. It's not possible to buy political, commercial because it won't be verified and people won't see it. There are plenty of regulations nowadays that are aimed to make all these social media websites and digital worlds we have access to more transparent and more predictable. The process progresses, the knowledge has become broader, and the information can be checked. So the situation is not as black as it's painted, though we are far from perfect situation. Increasing society's awareness is a way to ensure common security, but I don't think it's not so dark, it's not so black. I think it is, and I am really scared because this information affects our life and it will affect it even more in the future. But sitting here, I'm full of hope because the topic of disinformation is mentioned in conferences. It's reverberated by the European Commission. Can we take one more question? That's the question to our from the audience. Right. Me, as Ukrainian, I always have problems with algorithms because they always are supposed to protect us against disinformation propaganda. But recently, we have had a problem that the majority of posts have been blocked because they are this is not proper content or not suitable content. Is it a violation of the freedom of speech or the impact of bots? YouTube has not been mentioned. Every platform operates in a different way. We need to remember that Facebook and Twitter are different. Every case is different. But sometimes there are side effects. Aaron, you mentioned about Putin's breast. Disinformation. Yeah, apparent disinformation. Yeah, my point is that there are some side effects, unintended. So we need to work to ensure as many positive side effects and as little negative side effects as possible. I cannot comment on the specific cases. Algorithms push us into bubbles, but we need to act every attempt. Last question. 2 minutes and we have to finish. The gentleman near the wall was the first one. Yeah, the man in glasses. Good evening, Maciej Sokół, Wolna Szkoła, Free School. Do you think that understanding the mechanisms that rule social media should be included in the curriculum of public schools? Yes, it should. Poland 2050 has it in the political program. For half a day I've been arguing for it because previously I participated in a debate on the future of education and I tried to say that it's necessary to create benchmarks to check knowledge and that we need algorithms to check how a particular school teaches. I said the majority of jobs that these children will have do not exist and we can't call them. We don't know what competence will be necessary to perform these jobs. So if we do not think forward and if we don't implement social media, IT technologies and gaining resilience to disinformation and to hazardous content, we won't go far. Right. I recommend the Aces of Internet program. Then I can tell you more about it. Under Szkoła z Klasą Foundation, we are going to collaborate. Teachers come to our society and they want us to run classes based on critical thinking, but it's media and digital education. It's important to say how internet media work. There was a very interesting panel about education, and I do hope we'll manage to establish such a coalition and activate critical thinking. Great, so on an optimistic note, we close this panel. I hope we'll sit, discuss, act, and change Poland and the world for the better. Thank you.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.